Greetings and welcome to Ethio-Digest, and thank you for joining us. In today's programming, we would like to focus our attention on a major development in Ethiopia, namely the crisis in Tigray, and the move made by Tigrayans and its relevance and impact on the national political discourse, as well as the overwhelming shift in the balance of power that followed this historic move. Thank you for staying with us to the end. Tigray defies tyranny. Here is what transpired in Tigray. TPLF and TDF officially declared the interim government of Tigray, led by General Getachew Reda, null and void. They have decided to reinstate the pre-war regional government that was elected by 2.8 million Tigrayans. At the end of his term, and in a rather dramatic turn of events, the then president of the interim government, General Getachew Reda, abruptly left Mekelle and sat down with Abiy Ahmed and his core cabinet members. The meeting looked at reports he provided, and Kilo ended up extending the general's appointment for another year, citing an invalid clause. It didn't take minutes for analysts to explain the blunder carried out by the Prime Minister. This forced Abiy Ahmed's spokesperson to admit that extending the general's appointment for another year was based on a non-existing clause. For the overwhelming majority of Tigrayans, this appointment, conducted without consulting the signatory of the Pretoria Agreement, which is the TPLF, was of course dead on arrival. Following the general's return to Mekelle and TPLF's rejection of the appointment, Getachew Reda gave what we might call the most ambiguous statement in Tigrayan politics. He tried to appease Abiy Ahmed and Tigrayans simultaneously. But then came the call from Kilo. The instruction was clear. He was to retract what he said 24 hours ago and denounce the move by the TPLF that reinstated the pre-war government. He was also told to categorize the move by the TPLF and TDF as a coup d'etat. Getachew Reda did not disappoint his boss. He did exactly what Abiy Ahmed told him. He denounced his own organization and betrayed the very people that trusted him for over 50 years. He started imitating Abiy Ahmed and started warning Tigrayans not to mess with his presidency. And of course, he reasserted that he would neither step down nor would be forced to leave office. For most Tigrayans, though, the extension of General Reda's presidency or his obvious defection to Abiy Ahmed's camp was not as hurtful as what Getachew Reda painted Tigray to be in his annual report. Segments of his report were broadcast on all government-owned primetime television channels, and to say the least, they were delusional accounts of the region and its people. The Tigray that went through the most destructive war in the nation's recent history, and the Tigray that has been under siege and is still being systematically exterminated. And ladies and gentlemen, the Tigray where children are born and are dying a horrific death were not features of the show. In fact, images depicting this region resembled travel brochures promoting a tranquil Swiss suburb and a holiday destination in Tuscany. This was arguably the most treacherous crime Tigrayans have endured since they were written off by Abiy Ahmed and thrown under the bus by Getachew Reda and Tzadkan Gebretensai. Yes, another one bites the dust. And yes, Tigray has ended up with another disgraced general who found comfort in Abiy Ahmed's quarters. Reconciling the federal government and Tigrayans does not seem to be a possibility. That is because of one thing. Arat Kilo is obsessed with the removal of Tigrayans from the face of this earth. Don't take our word for it. Listen to what they have to say.
የኢትዮጵያን ጠላቶች እንደ ጸጉር ቅማል አንድ ባንድ እናራግፋለን።
But on the other hand, Tigrayans are left with no choice but to defend themselves by any means necessary. As the first obligatory step to bring peace to the region, Tigrayans, along with their Ethiopian brothers and sisters, are reciprocating the colonial's move by strategizing the end of the current regime as a precondition to march forward and build a democratic and peaceful and inclusive Ethiopia. Simply speaking, the situation at hand is highly volatile and dangerous and is ready to turn into another destructive war that will destabilize the entire neighborhood. Even though we do not know when and where Abiy Ahmed's soldiers will fire the first shot against Tigrayans, though we cannot predict how long this genocidal campaign will last, we can assert with certainty that Tigrayans will never back down. It is not in the DNA of the daughters and sons of Adwa and Aksum. It is not in the DNA of the descendants of Sheba and Menelik I and Ase Johannes IV to accept any sort of tyranny or injustice. Tigrayans have a message to Abiy Ahmed that happens to resemble to the words of a poet. Here is what it sounds like. Credit must be given to Abiy Ahmed, who has, if you will, democratized genocide and is committing the crime of all crimes against every other ethnic group in the nation, which prompted the unity of all Ethiopians across the land. Thus, Tigrayans are not alone. And the step they took towards reinstating their democratically elected government and their rightful resistance against being ruled by a custodian, a viceroy, is but a triumph not just for Tigrayans, but also for the entire nation. Ladies and gentlemen, we are obliged to congratulate Tigrayans for defying tyranny and for standing with their brothers and sisters and advance the struggle for peace, justice, and freedom. Whether Abiy Ahmed liked it or not, Tigrayans have become the undisputed vanguards in defying his tyrannical regime. But that is not all. Even after enduring the bloodiest war in the region, and even while being denied a seat at the table to decide their own affairs, Tigrayans did not fail to uphold the age-old tradition and custom of washing the feet of Ethiopian pilgrims that showed up to celebrate the annual religious holiday in Aksum. Thus, the picturesque and yet continually burgeoning alliance of all Ethiopians against the current regime is complete. Obviously, this coalition born out of necessity has shocked the in and outs of Arat Kilo, because the domino effect of this resistance to injustice will ultimately crumble the very house of cards, Arat Kilo. But any minute now, the warring viceroy would launch another round of genocide on Tigrayans, looting what little they have left and raping their women and girls. But this time around, Tigrayans are not alone. They are surrounded by people who admire their courage and bravery, and people who respect their cause, and better yet, they are accompanied by neighbors that are standing with them to defend their right to life. In short, the table has turned. While an overwhelming majority of Tigrayans and Ethiopians support this move by TPLF and TDF, this historically significant step is not without challenges. There are people within and without Tigray who consider this move by the two organizations as a move to consolidate power, a hindrance in an inclusive transitional process. Here is our take. The fundamental agreement between all parties that the current regime in Arat Kilo is a forsworn enemy of Tigrayans foreshadows any further negotiations, to the point that Tigrayans cannot afford another day under the rule of Abiy Ahmed's genocidal junta. The two interim presidents have unequivocally denounced their organization, the TPLF, and have sided with Abiy Ahmed. They have also initiated an armed movement sanctioned and funded by Abiy Ahmed to invade and control Tigray. And the outlawing of the TPLF has left the region without a representative to lead them out of the present mess. Thus, the reinstating of the pre-war regional government is but the only feasible thing to do, especially since holding an election in Tigray is not a possibility. And equally important, the reinstating of the sovereign power after being ruled by a foreign force is a very common practice and is not unprecedented in our own recent history. After the Italians lost and Haile Selassie returned to Addis Ababa, even though a number of influential patriots wanted to disqualify him as a legitimate head of state, citing his physical absence during the 5-year war of liberation, the reinstatement of the crown did materialize, and Ethiopia remained free from colonialism. The problem, however, emerged when Haile Selassie I failed to build on that momentum and democratize the nation. In other words, in the case of Tigray or Ethiopia, at this juncture, where the first thing on the list is the removal of Abiy Ahmed's government, and at this moment, where war is raging across the landscape and across the borders, and where we have a number of foreign hands managing their proxy wars, and at this moment and time, where we have a number of unpredictable possible outcomes that are directly and indirectly related to the present chaotic global order, the changing of the horses doesn't seem to advance the struggle. We believe we should be even more clear, only because there needs to be clarity on this subject matter. What we mean is, there will be the time and the energy and the resources to address each and every issue Ethiopians would bring to the table from around the country. We can only guarantee that there would not be an alternate route to facing the music and taking the bull by the horn, and resolve all issues peacefully. We should aim as high as an Ethiopia where all the 30 articles of the universally declared human rights are the law of the land. But, ladies and gentlemen, we should be honest and wise and admit that time is not now. The silencing of the guns is a precondition to dwell in that historical process and a prerequisite to hold the transition. We should, however, collectively expect ourselves to exact an immediate democratic process. Because the inclusiveness of this or any other process and the inclusiveness of the transitional government are an absolute necessity for the continuation of this nation and an absolute necessity to ultimately lead Ethiopians out of the present darkness. As to the 3-page diatribe Getachew Reda posted on social media regarding the reinstatement of the people-elected government and his denouncing the TPLF for this action, we are inclined to say a word or two about the matter. First, everything Getachew Reda did in this document was pleading to the international community to get involved and stop this move by TPLF and TDF and the majority of Tigrayans. In spite of what everyone knows about Abiy Ahmed, why the international community keeps lending him a hand would be a topic that we would address in the future. But for now, that pleading has gotten traction. It has gotten positive responses that prompted the involvement of the same small-time crooks, headed by Abiy Ahmed's favorite, also known as Chief Olusegun Matthew Okikiola Ogunboye Aremu Obasanjo. The same Obasanjo, whom Abiy Ahmed awarded a mansion for his services in pacifying Ethiopia. Ladies and gentlemen, for a lack of a better term, this is quite hurtful. Quite hurtful. It hurts because the pleading of Ethiopians across the globe to help stop the bloodshed in Ethiopia did not get anyone's attention until a despot and his regime are openly threatened. It hurts because individuals whose blood-drenched history are put in charge of the task of bringing peace. It also hurts because the same people who the last time around were instrumental in the political and military campaign Abiy Ahmed launched on Tigrayans are leading this peace process. It hurts because even after signing the Pretoria Peace Agreement, the systemic ethnic cleansing campaign continued silently in Tigray. We can go for hours talking about the fallacy, or more importantly, the tragicness and farcical nature of this peace initiative. But we decided to summarize our view by stating our obligatory and yet simple message to this up-to-no-good paragraph full of names cutthroat criminal known as Obasanjo. Sir, Tigray will never be the Biafra of East Africa. Get over it. Long before you colonizers that made you who you are became nations, Tigrayans, as well as Ethiopians, were known to tower across the continents. And thousands of years later, we find these same people as the only people who have never compromised their sovereignty. You may not be too knowledgeable about the age-old tradition that owes high regard to resistance that is embedded in this society. But the fact of the matter is that it is a core element in the very Ethiopian culture Tigray shares proudly. In short, you should know better than thinking about and plotting to subdue this legendary nation. Since you have no shame, however, we are compelled to ask you to get your hands off of 135 million Ethiopians. You are not welcome, sir. The second and most important item we want to remind anyone who dares to explore what Getachew Reda had to say is that we suggest they begin by paying attention to what he opined about Abiy Ahmed on several previous occasions, and quite recently when he went head-to-head against Mehdi Hassan on Al Jazeera.
Federal government that you spent years calling war criminals. You said Abiy Ahmed, and I'm quoting you, perfected genocide into an art form. Do you stand by those genocide accusations, or have you walked them back now that you work with?
Whatever the superlatives there, I know all kinds of crimes were committed in Tigray.
For the audience watching, you still believe it was a genocide,
Yes.
but you're not willing to say he did the genocide?
Yes.
It was a genocide that just happened by itself?
No, there were so many actors involved.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is,
Was he one of them?
well, the war on Tigray was led by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed himself.
So he led the genocide?
I mean, we wouldn't have to be that specific.
We do. That's why we invited you here, to find out your...
He led the war.
He led the
So
war.
I will...
Ladies and gentlemen, we have no wish to dignify this person and discuss him further. Neither should Tigrayans nor Ethiopians. Because a person who willingly and knowingly works for an architect of genocide does not deserve anyone's attention. What he and his friends deserve is a day in court, charged with aiding and abetting and committing genocide. Ladies and gentlemen, right after completing this production, the news about the establishment of the Provisional Council of Tigray was announced in Addis Ababa. The same two Getachew Reda and Tigrayans, who have organized and trained a paramilitary group to conquer Tigray, have made it official that they will march to Mekelle and oust the people-elected government. Needless to say, that they have suggested and have assumed and have taken for granted the elimination of the political and military leaders in Tigray. What we know is, even if it happens, this will not be the first time. Tigrayans have lost many indispensable leaders, but their struggle for justice and peace has only continued to gain momentum. As to Getachew Reda and Tigrayans, and as to their adventurous campaign to conquer Tigray, we know better than wishing them luck. But we can only warn them. The voices of their own brothers and sisters, both dead and alive, will speak louder than the barking lapdogs, and will draw more attention than the dog and pony show from Arat Kilo. Ladies and gentlemen, with that serious note, we want to conclude our presentation for the day. Thank you for joining us, and we wish you the best of times.